What's up everyone, and welcome back to HateWatchers for another monthly review roundup video where we discuss everything that we watched in the month of May. It was a slow month for the channel in terms of videos, but there was no slowdown in the amount of things that we watched. I had to travel during the first half of the month, but luckily there really wasn't much to discuss anyway, as it was a pretty barren month for new releases. Without further delay, let's launch right into this monthly recap. And as always, there will of course be some amount of minor spoilers for everything discussed herein. Let's start with the big screen, where May brought us a few big name releases. First among them was Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Right off the top, I have to say that the title of this movie just irked me from the first time I read it. I know it falls in line with the naming convention of the previous films, but the length of the title and the fact that you have the expression "of the" twice, along with both planet and kingdom being separate words for a domain, I don't know, it just bothered me more than it should. As for the movie itself, I honestly haven't seen an Apes movie since Mark Wahlberg was in one. I knew the movies were still going, but I wasn't aware that they were as well received by audiences as they were. I couldn't tell you about any of the preceding films like Dawn or War, but I can tell you about this one because I sat through it. And truthfully, I just didn't have any strong opinion about it one way or the other. It just seemed like another so-so entry into an ongoing series. I know Caesar was a prominent figure in the previous films, but he's dead and ascended to some kind of Jesus-like figure by this point. Now again, I couldn't tell you for sure, but it seemed like the movie probably missed his absence as they had to put forth a new, unknown central character. I think I was simply expecting more from a movie about a planet and a kingdom, at least more than the struggle of a couple of apes and a human fighting against one village of opposing apes. I thought the scale of the conflict would be much larger. The ending does have much broader implications for the world, but the film itself focused on a relatively small conflict. I did think it was funny that in one scene, this young human girl has a super intimate knowledge about explosives, and when they ask how she knows all of this, one of the monkeys literally starts dancing and they change the subject. Like the script reached this unexplainable point of contrivance, and the writer said, "Hey, don't look over there, look over here at this dancing monkey." And it was equally unexplainable how the same 23-year-old woman had all this other very technical knowledge at the end. But hey, I really don't expect too much from a talking monkey movie. Next up we had Atlas, the J-Lo-led pseudo-rom-com therapy session movie masquerading as a sci-fi action flick. J-Lo shit up the screen for 2 hours, shirking the responsibility of bringing to life an ultra-capable super genius in favor of playing someone with the emotional age of a teenager the whole way through. Combine that with a cringy, current-day premise centered on the dangers of AI, a waste of decent actors, mediocre visual quality, and thoughtless action scenes, and Atlas was doomed from the start. Then we had the highest profile release in our opinion with Furiosa, a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road. It's quite appropriate that the Mad Max saga part of the title was down below in tiny letters, considering Max himself was in the movie for 10 seconds. Furiosa was different from Fury Road in that instead of making its hay with the big vehicular combat scenes, it opted for more of a deep dive into Furiosa's character. You still had those same action scenes, and they were incredible, but they weren't the focus in this prequel. As we said in our video, Furiosa was a pretty good movie for what it did, but we question if we really needed this movie. Fury Road stands on its own just fine, and I think it's hard to justify a character piece on Furiosa. I just never felt any real need to know more about her. And based on its box office struggles, it looks like there was some validity to that. In the end, we think that Fury Road was a more entertaining film, so while Furiosa was pretty good, we still dubbed it the unequal prequel. We did get videos up for Atlas and Furiosa, so check those out if you're looking for a deeper analysis of those films. Downsizing from the big screen to the small, the only two things we were watching, half for our own interests and half for the channel, were 2 Star Wars animated shows in The Bad Batch and Tales of the Empire. The Bad Batch ended its 3-season run in May with a somewhat lackluster finale to what was a decent show at times. The show was probably at its best in season 2, and it felt like they were rushing to reach some kind of a conclusion in just 3 seasons, resulting in an ending that missed the mark for a lot of people. 2 things about The Bad Batch are funny though, in that first off, it's another show that is centered on Project Necromancer, as Disney still flounders in trying to present a satisfying answer as to how Palpatine returned in The Rise of Skywalker. That's at least 2 shows so far they've used to try and explain one of the dumbest decisions they made with the franchise. Secondly, Season 3 of The Bad Batch saw another classic Dave Filoni retcon, as he erased an incredibly satisfying and more importantly canon death for Asajj Ventress in the Dark Disciple book in order to bring her back to life for 1 episode in this show. An episode that ended up being entirely inconsequential and a series of events that could have happened without her. But hey, that's what Filoni does. It's like a compulsion at this point. Then May the 4th brought the pretty highly anticipated release of Tales of the Empire, the successor to the highly praised Tales of the Jedi. This pseudo-anthology series focuses on side stories of known characters, giving a better picture of how those characters fit into the overarching narrative of Star Wars, and showing us short stories that take place between the larger stories of the movies and live-action shows. As I said, Tales of the Jedi was pretty damn good, mostly thanks to the story arc focused on Count Dooku. And this time, Disney was set to give the Empire its due, finally telling stories from the bad guy's point of view. Well, if you believed it was going to go down that way, I have a bridge to sell you. Of course, Disney did what Disney does, as one of the two bad guys at the heart of this series was completely redeemed and not evil anymore by the end. Disney simply cannot give villains any kind of credence or credibility, and cannot tell a dark story. And to make matters worse, many fans were waiting a decade to see how this character's story played out after her fate was left up in the air in the Clone Wars show, and it ended up being quite a dud. And the other character the show focused on, Morgan Elsbeth, already died in Ahsoka. And like with Furiosa, there was no real fan interest in seeing more of her tale in the first place. So Tales of the Empire left a bad taste in people's mouths, wiping away the goodwill Tales of the Jedi earned them. Now you might ask, and it's fair to ask, with Disney Star Wars in the state that it is, and the low likelihood of actually discussing these shows on the channel, why do I even bother watching them? Well, Star Wars, specifically the verse as a whole, and the pre-Disney works, is still my favorite fantasy universe, so some of the drive to watch these shows comes from a genuine place of interest. But on the other side of the coin, there's value to staying current on the state of Star Wars and changes or additions to the existing canon. It helps give me a fuller view of the world of Star Wars, thus helping inform discussions when we get to a more high-profile show like The Acolyte coming out this week. I do what I can to speak from an informed position on what we review, whether it's building knowledge on characters that might show up somewhere else, or tracking changes or violations of the existing canon or lore. So the more time I take to inform myself, the better I'm able to inform you on why and when you shouldn't waste your time. With less in the way of new releases, we had more time this past month to watch things for ourselves, and we put in the work on that front, watching 6 movies and 3 TV shows. For television, we binged all of the first season of Twisted Metal, something we missed when it came out. And that TV show was a lot better than it really had any right to be. It looked a little cheap and unpolished, but it pays a good amount of homage to the Twisted Metal games, and it was just a lot of goofy graphic fun. But I never viewed it as a serious show, and you shouldn't either. One of the best aspects of the show is that there's hardly any lore to go off of when creating a show based on a video game series about absurd vehicles doing everything they can to destroy other absurd vehicles. So there's a pretty wide open road in front of the show in terms of what they can do with the story. And there's apparently a season 2 on the horizon, so that's something to look forward to. Next up was Baby Reindeer, which was insane. It's worth a watch if you haven't given into the hype about it already. It's a pretty wild, somewhat true story about a failing comedian and his stalker. I will warn you though, it gets super dark around episode 5, and it's pretty tough to get through, but it's definitely something else. To cap things off, we of course watched a couple South Park specials, beginning with the Ozempic episode, where the creators took aim at one of our favorite elephants in the room, Lizzo. You know, I don't see too many people defending her anymore after the jolly icon got accused of sexual harassment. Strange how that works. It's almost like people were defending someone they really didn't know. Anyway, it wasn't one of South Park's best outings, to be honest. I don't know if the current climate of social discourse got to them, or if it was the $100 million contract, but they haven't been as on point with their critiques as they were in the past. Outside of the episode lambasting Disney and Kathleen Kennedy, of course. Although that being said, the South Park OnlyFans special, not suitable for children, was a bit better. Moving to the big screen, May was the month of classics for us, as we went back to watch a handful of older films, some of which we'd seen before and some of which we hadn't. We watched both the original Conan movies, The Barbarian and The Destroyer, and a couple jailhouse flicks in The Green Mile and Shawshank Redemption. And for Military Appreciation Month, we opted to watch 1917, which we never got around to back when it came out. And we topped it all off with the comedy classic Slapshot, a very non-PC movie about a semi-pro hockey team. Which brings us nicely to the last thing on our list we've been watching all month, which is the NHL Playoffs. Playoff hockey is almost always very special, as almost overnight, the quality and intensity of the play picks up dramatically when the playoffs begin. For me, there was almost a little bit of a taste of staleness going into the playoffs because we've had nearly the same matchups in the first couple rounds for the last 4 or 5 years. But that's also resulted in more intense rivalries being born. And these playoffs have not disappointed up to this point. They've been chippy and high scoring, and there's a ton of tense games leading to multiple overtimes and a handful of Game 7s. It's been appointment viewing for any hockey fan for the whole month of May. And that is everything we watched in the month of May. As always, let us know in the comments your thoughts on anything we talked about here, and let us know what you've been watching for this past month and what you thought about it. June is looking like a stacked month with the releases of The Acolyte, The Boys, House of the Dragon, Horizon, and The Crow, so stay tuned. And with that, remember to leave a like on the video and subscribe to HateWatchers for reviews of current shows and movies. Thank you for saluting Military Appreciation Month with us today, and we'll catch you on the next one.